A federal judge has dismissed several counts against former President Donald Trump stemming from the January 6th insurrection. The partner of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick filed a civil lawsuit against the former president. Sicknick responded to the attack and died of natural causes a day later after suffering 2 strokes.
Well, a court battle is brewing now in Maine. Former President Trump is appealing a ruling banning him from the presidential ballot. In an 11-page complaint, his attorneys argue that the Secretary of State, who is a Democrat, lacks the authority to make the decision and is biased against Trump. So let's bring in Jessica Levinson now for a little more analysis on all of this. She's a CBS News legal contributor and professor at Loyola Law School. Thanks for joining us. So this is sort of similar to what we saw play out in Colorado. Trump is also expected to appeal that decision all the way to the Supreme Court. Can you just explain how these legal actions might play out? What are, I guess, the various outcomes?
Well, I think the bottom line is we're all waiting for the U.S. Supreme Court. And the Colorado case is the one that is pending before the court. 2 Colorado GOP officials, I believe, have already appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. We're waiting for the Trump campaign to appeal. And once the Supreme Court has provided guidance on what the federal Constitution says, what this provision, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, put into the Constitution after the Civil War, meant to protect us against people who fought for the Confederacy from then seeking to serve in government. What exactly that means in modern times, then all of these states will have guidance on what to do. In terms of these particular cases, as you said, the Colorado case, the Colorado Supreme Court made a decision. There's nothing left except for that case to go to the U.S. Supreme Court. In the Maine case, we're in a much earlier phase here, where it's the Maine Secretary of State as opposed to the court who made that decision. And now the Trump team has appealed that decision to the Maine state court system. So that case is in, again, a much earlier phase.
All right, let's talk about the former president's federal election interference case. Last night, the former president's legal team filed another motion urging the court to dismiss the special counsel's indictment on grounds of presidential immunity, what Trump calls absolute immunity. Absolute immunity,
Is that what
Jessica.
He calls it?
That's what he calls it. Is there such a thing, and what can we expect to happen there?
I'm really hoping for any of my students watching at home, they say that is not absolute. That privilege is limited, because what we talk about in class is the fact that there is something called presidential immunity. None of us are making this up. It's a judicially created doctrine. The Supreme Court recognized it after former President Nixon said, I don't want to turn over those tapes I made in the Oval Office to the special counsel because there's presidential immunity. The Supreme Court said, you know what? You have a different job than the rest of us. The president has to make a number of decisions, have a number of conversations with high-level officials, talk about sensitive information. There is some information that can be protected, but not everything. And that's why former President Nixon had to hand over those tapes, because the privilege is not absolute, because it is limited. And what President Trump is arguing in brief is that he engaged in official acts leading up to January 6th and on January 6th. And so he should enjoy absolute immunity. I don't think that that's what the court's precedent tells us, and I don't think that's what the court will ultimately rule here.
So, you know, we learned today that Democratic Senator Bob Menendez has been accused of taking bribes from Qatar. But on the Republican side, 2 Republican political consultants, these are consultants, who backed Trump's 2016 campaign, admitted that they took money also from the Qatari government. And in exchange, they tried to influence U.S. policy in the Middle East. So I'm curious if they would be facing charges. It's different than, you know, somebody who, a sitting lawmaker, you know, what the implications might be. Could there be any implications for the former president?
So I have not seen any reporting that their actions are tied to the former president. So I'll take the last part first. I think they acted, the allegations and what they agreed to says that they acted of their own volition. And could they be charged? Absolutely. They are part of a prosecution diversion program right now. And if they violate the terms of essentially that settlement agreement, then they could face more penalties and or time in prison. Essentially what they have What they've agreed to is that they lobbied for a foreign government. They didn't register as lobbyists for foreign government, and they weren't forthcoming with federal officials when they were looking into that particular setup. The allegation is that the Qatari government said, here's some money, now try to influence U.S. Policy, and they did not go through, let's say, the proper channels and mechanisms to do so.
All right, Jessica Levinson, always great to have you. I hope your students were watching.
Thank you.